everyone, welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host Paula Taylor and this is episode 163. And as always, if you are enjoying the show, there are multiple ways that you can support my work. Rate, follow the podcast, you can book a session with me one-on-one, join one of my group classes or events, or you can donate to me directly to support this work through the link in the podcast notes, as well as on my website, paulataylorenergy.com. Go to the podcast page and find the link to donate through PayPal. So today we are going to be talking about neurodivergence and spiritual awakening. And this is a topic that I've been sort of dancing around for a really long time. I'm going to tell you how this came to me. But I want to just say very quickly, if you think this topic doesn't apply to you, you might be mistaken, so stick around. Whether you have an official diagnosis of neurodivergence, we're going to go into that a little bit, or not, the themes of this episode are universal, as well as what we're going to meditate on is a pretty universal theme today, to claim some more self-love, to claim some space, to claim your light and let it shine. So I encourage you to stick around. So the first thing I'm going to say, just a little disclaimer, I do not speak for all neurodivergent people. There are a vast array of people with neurodivergence in the world. I actually prefer the term neurospicy, so you'll hear me use that probably a lot today. I kind of like that term. It's got a little bit of play and fun in it. Feels a little bit less heavy than neurodivergence. But I just want to be clear that I am speaking from my own experience, as well as some experience that I've had working with clients who are neurodivergent. But just like everyone has their own experience, neurodivergent people have their own experiences. So I'm going to talk about neurodivergence and spiritual awakening today as it has come up for me, and I'm guessing that will be reflected back to me in at least some of the people who are listening to this podcast. And if not for you personally, maybe for someone in your life. So I recently read this really amazing book called Cassandra in Reverse by Holly Smale. That's S-M-A-L-E. I will put the link to that and the name of it in the podcast notes, showing the book here on my podcast. It's all in black and white. I have a super old school Kindle, but Cassandra in Reverse by Holly Smale. So this is one of those books I read a ton. I really like to read fiction. It's kind of been my escape since I was a child. Actually has to do with my neurodivergence, which we'll get into. But this is one of those books that it really got me because I felt so seen. And I don't think I've ever read a book with a main character who was neurodivergent in a way that I could really relate to. And first of all, it emphasized the importance of seeing yourself reflected in media, which as somebody with white privilege, I probably have not thought about enough. But reading about a character who shared a lot of traits that I share and was ridiculed in the same ways that I've been ridiculed was really powerful for me. So I encourage you to read that book. It's really heartwarming, it's funny, and it's really, for me, again, there's a much deeper layer to it, and I'm not going to give anything away, but this journey of claiming your space, claiming your light, letting it shine, really beautifully reflected in this book. So this really, it's very interesting. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in synchronicities. I just randomly chose this book I read again a ton, and I get my books from the library on my Kindle, and something about the title and the title page kind of jumped out at me when I was looking, and I went and read the description. There's a little bit of like a sci-fi component or fantasy. I'm not sure how you want to put that, but it just jumped out at me, and I decided to put it on my list of things to read. In the meantime, I have been really grappling with my own neurodiversity or neurospiciness in the last few years, but especially in the last couple of months. So at the end of 2022, I was officially diagnosed with ADHD, what we sometimes call a late diagnosis. There are a lot of women, especially in their 30s and 40s and beyond, who have received these late diagnoses for things like ADHD and autism, things that all are sort of under that umbrella of neurospiciness. And when we were children, it was not well understood in general, ADHD especially, and it was especially not well understood in women. This is a very long-standing, patriarchal, ridiculous pattern in the medical field and mental health that is still going on, where we only study men, we don't study women. And so all of the studies and all of the DSM criteria, which is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual that psychologists use to diagnose people, all of these things usually studied mostly on white men. So women, people of color, not really included in these studies. And so often, just like with women and heart attacks, women have different symptoms of heart attacks that often go undiagnosed and missed, and women are told you're just having heartburn and sent home, and sometimes they die. So very important to understand that most of our medical research, our mental health research, is based on white men, first of all. So that's how a lot of us got missed. But also, it just wasn't well understood. And I think our understanding of autism has really evolved. People still refer to it as a spectrum disorder. Most people now, that's not really a gold standard way of thinking. I don't prefer that. But I've seen it represented as a wheel, and that makes a lot more sense to me because there are so many different components of autism. Some people have one or two. Some people have them kind of, if you think about it as a pie chart, like two pieces of the pie totally filled out and the rest of them not so much. Again, neurodiversity is diverse. And it's a giant umbrella term that kind of includes the experience of autism, the experience of ADHD. I talked a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago on the show, about how I asked my psychiatrist if I should get an official diagnosis of autism because I am 150% certain I have it. And his words to me, which I can't repeat verbatim here, were, if I were you, I wouldn't give a fig about getting a diagnosis because you know yourself really well, you know how to take care of yourself, and why spend thousands of dollars to get a diagnosis just to put a label on something, which I really appreciated. But also what I will say is that sometimes receiving a label like that can actually be very validating. And that's what happened when I read this book. It was so validating to me to read about someone else who felt other people's emotions in a different context that I do, who had these extreme sensory sensitivities, especially to sound, but also to touch. I've never seen that reflected in a way that I really felt seen and validated, and that's very important. And the other thing is, throughout this book, this character, Cassandra, is just told over and over and over again that she's wrong, that she's too much of this, that she's not enough of this, just over and over and over and over again. And this is the overarching theme that I was already hinting at. That happens to all of us. But for people who are neurodivergent, it happens to us even more because our brains are wired in a way that sort of create what some people might think of as quirkiness, what to us is just part of our personalities. These are things that have not been well accepted by society at large. We've also been talking about the 3D, 5D timeline shift, and this absolutely fits into that because part of the shift into 5D is a shift into more unconditional love. And that is about allowing for other people's experiences. That is about listening to other people when they tell us that they're having an experience and believing them, even if we don't share it. And all of that came up for me while I was reading this book in a way that, again, really reflected kind of what was going on in my personal life. So I've talked a few times about the trip I went to Bali. I got this amazing opportunity to attend and to present at a workshop in Bali. It was amazing, but it was very challenging for me as a neurospicy person, as somebody with a lot of sensitivities, as somebody with just all of the neurospiciness that makes up my makeup, that is part of who I am. Things like sensitivity to sound came up a lot. Sensitivity to temperature. It was so hot there by the end of the trip. I ended up having to retreat to my room a lot because it was the only place with air conditioning, or to get into the pool because I was just chronically overheated. There was so much stimulation in general. ADHD is about processing information. How does your brain process information? So it makes us somewhat prone to overstimulation in that way. And then having autism unofficially, I am chronically overstimulated when I am out in the world. It's just, again, partly how I'm made. So even just getting there, getting on the plane, being in a crowd of people, all of that was really challenging to me, and it challenged me to really step up and take care of myself. But it also brought up some feelings and experiences around not being accepted or allowed, feeling like I'm allowed in certain situations. And I understand that it's difficult to make allowances for everyone all the time. We are all different. It is our responsibility to take care of ourselves. But when you are neurospicy, it sometimes feels like the world is not made for you. This is so beautifully reflected in that book that I mentioned, Cassandra in Reverse. Just very, very well reflected. And even for people who maybe have not had that experience, there's a really beautiful look at the inner world of somebody who is neurospicy and what it is like for them negotiating to what other people seem like normal everyday experiences to people with neurodivergence can seem completely overwhelming and unfriendly. So I had multiple experiences in Bali where I had to choose not to participate in things because they were taking place in an environment in which I could not be comfortable and feel safe, essentially. Noisy environments, things like that. There were just times when I could not participate. And it's hard because we are trained from an early age that there is something wrong with us. I think all of us have that programming, but if you are neurodivergent, it is even more intense. That you are told over and over again, you are too much of something, you are not enough of something, you're not social enough, you're too sensitive. I received that over and over and over again. Not that you're not social enough necessarily, because I was really good at masking for a long time and just allowing myself to be hurt over and over again. I was traumatized over and over and over again throughout my childhood and really up until the last few years by trying to force myself into situations that were not comfortable for me, that were beyond uncomfortable. They were triggering, they were traumatizing for me as someone who is neurospicy. So I just totally lost my train of thought. That's so funny. I had kind of an idea of where this was going, and then sometimes I go on this meandering path. Yes, that's right. So, what does trauma healing and spiritual awakening have to do with neurodivergence? Because the title of this episode is Neurodivergence and Spiritual Awakening. I did a whole show a while ago about, that was an ADHD brain moment, by the way, where my brain just like shut off for a minute and then rebooted itself. That you see me do that a lot on the show, or sort of lose my train of thought and come back. That is my brain trying to process. Sometimes my brain goes faster than my mouth does, and I get ahead of myself and I forget where I was in what I was going to talk about. So I did a show a while ago about how trauma healing leads to spiritual awakening. Go back and listen to it. Really important information. If you are neurodivergent, if you are neurospicy, I guarantee you have been traumatized repeatedly by the way that society is set up, by the way that our schools are set up. We've gotten more understanding about that now. There are some allowances made for children who have sensory issues. If you are over the age of 30, you probably didn't get those kind of allowances. And like I was, you were forced to sit still and figure out how to mask your neurodivergence as much as possible in order to be accepted. And the sad thing is, like for someone like me, no matter how hard I tried, I was never fully accepted. It still happens to me. I am weird. I totally own that now for the most part, and I celebrate it. And again, if we're talking about going from 3D to 5D, the weird people are the ones who are going to help us get to 5D. The weird people, the neurospicy people, are the ones who are going to help us do things like solve climate change and create new forms of government that are inclusive and that actually work for people instead of just making rich people richer. Weird people are the best people. And everybody is weird in some way. Again, whether or not you are neurodivergent, whether you have an official diagnosis, there are things about you that you have been hiding because you feel like they won't be accepted if you show them in society. And the only way that changes is for us to talk about it and to intentionally do that work of change. That starts with working on ourselves, because the world is a reflection of our own relationship with ourselves. So every single person on the planet has trauma. I'm 100% convinced of this, because even if you grew up in an idyllic home and you didn't have personal developmental trauma in your family, you have been traumatized by society in some way. And if you are neurospicy, neurodivergent, that is magnified to a great effect, because just being in society is traumatizing to people who have things like sensory sensitivities, who have things like processing differences. I'm going to use the word differences in the brain. Since I was a kid, when I am overstimulated, I have a hard time understanding people. I don't have hearing problems. In fact, my hearing is ultra sensitive, and they used to take me for hearing tests and be like, Paula's hearing is better than, like, way, you know, she's in the 99th percentile for hearing, like her hearing is way more sensitive than everyone else. And what I understand now, later in life, is that it was a processing thing. So sometimes somebody, and whispering is the worst. I had this friend in grade school who used to whisper in my ear all the time. And every time she whispered to me, it was like, and I was just like, what? And after the third or fourth time of asking her to repeat it, she would get so angry at me that I would finally just be like, and kind of like give a non-committal response that made it seem like I had understood what she said, but I wasn't like fully agreeing or disagreeing with her, because I could not understand what she was saying. Again, it wasn't that I couldn't hear it. This still happens to me now, and especially now I understand when I've been overstimulated, and it happens to me a lot when I'm working in my office and I'm in this huge expansive space and I'm fully focused, I'm hyper focused, to use a neurodivergent term, on holding space for my client. I am giving my all, and then I come home and my husband and I will try to watch a TV show, and I cannot for the life of me understand anything they're saying, and I have to have the subtitles on. And he even said to me a couple weeks ago, he's like, maybe you should get your hearing checked. I think like you're going deaf. And I was like, it's not that I can't hear it. It's that my brain is not processing the information fast enough for me to understand it. I could read all day long. That was my biggest escape as a child. It allowed me to be in a world other than my own. That was my first experience of hyperfocus. And looking back on that, there were times when I was so deeply engrossed in a book, I was called rude. I was not responding to people. You know, I would get in trouble because I would read when we would go out to restaurants, and my mom would be like, you should be participating in the conversation. And there's a bunch of adults talking about stuff that I didn't understand or have anything to really say. So I would just always bring my book. And I understand now that is a component of my neurospiciness, that ability to hyper-focus to the point that the whole world goes away. And reading has always done that for me. So when my brain is totally overwhelmed and I can't understand a word that's coming out of your mouth, if there's subtitles, I can follow along. I could know exactly what you're saying. Fortunately, we don't walk around with little subtitle things scrolling across our chests. Maybe we should, maybe we will in the future. So throughout my childhood and all the way up until now, I repeatedly received this messaging that there was something wrong with me. Why can't you just blah? That's a big one. Or you're too blah, or you're not enough blah. And again, all of us receive this messaging, but there's something about being neurodivergent that just being in the world makes you feel like you're wrong. And how does that lead to spiritual awakening? Let's talk about that. So there's a pipeline directly from trauma healing to spiritual awakening, because as part of trauma healing, we start to question things. Because part of trauma healing is dismantling the programming that we received growing up that was not correct. A lot of times it's just flat out wrong, this programming, or it doesn't serve us. At a certain point, it served your survival. Later on in life, it's actually holding you back. So the journey into spiritual awakening for a majority of people actually starts with trauma healing. Again, I did a whole show on that. I don't want to go too deeply into that. So people who are neurospicy are traumatized just by being alive. just by existing in the world in the way we do. Every single time I walk into Sam's Club, I am traumatized by the sound. Now, I wear earplugs most of the time if I remember them. Sometimes I forget. And sometimes I think I can do something. And then about halfway through, that's the other interesting thing, is that our threshold of tolerance for sensory input tends to be lower than what people call neurotypical. I'm not sure I believe that anybody's really typical, but the world is designed in a way that is very boxed. We're very boxed in the way that we are supposed to express ourselves in society. And I think I've said this on the show before, but sometimes I'll be in the middle of a store or somewhere out in public and I see a little kid having a meltdown. That I can identify with. I always am like, oh man, kid, I am with you. It is so loud in here. It is hot in here. You asked for something. You're not getting it. Like, I understand that more than I understand this sort of adulting thing that we've collectively decided on, of just being stoic all the time and acting like everything's okay, even when it's not. Adults with autism have meltdowns. And again, it's been really interesting for me because I have been thinking about this a lot, especially since my trip to Bali. I've also been doing a lot of ancestral healing, kind of family healing work. And I've been thinking about my two uncles, my mother's two brothers that I knew. She had another brother who passed away when I was fairly young. And in my mind now, one of them is loud autistic and one of them is quiet autistic. But it really just hit me the other day that one of my uncles was autistic. The other one kind of, I knew, we, back in the day, we might have used the term that he seemed on the spectrum. My other uncle was oftentimes mad, and so I think everybody just assumed he was angry. And when I was a child, over and over and over again, people would tell me, people in my family, my mom, whatever, you're so much like your uncle, you're so much like your uncle. And the implication there was that you don't want to turn out like him because he's angry and he yells at people and that is abusive. There is no excuse for that. And being however you are, whatever neurodivergence, neurospiciness you have, being abusive to people is never acceptable. But what I realized just the other day, I was in a session, and he's since passed on, but he kind of showed up in my session. First of all, I had this really beautiful memory come up with him where we were sitting under his porch listening to a thunderstorm, and I was really young, maybe 4 or 5, and I was getting scared by the thunder, and I was like, oh, I don't think I should be out here, maybe I should go inside. And he taught me how to count between the lightning and the thunder to judge how far off a storm was. And I realized it's one of my favorite childhood memories because we were just being together. And there's something about that uncle. I always understood him, and I was never afraid of him in the way that I think my sisters were. I was older, but when he would start yelling and essentially having an autistic meltdown, now I understand, there was a part of me that understood that understood the feeling underneath that, this feeling of, I created my world to be a way that feels doable to me, and you have disrupted that world, and it is overwhelming to me. Now, should you lash out in that moment? Absolutely not. That's something that trauma healing and spiritual awakening work can help us learn how to do. But the underlying feeling behind getting overstimulated and going into a meltdown, I think from a really early age, I really understood. And I felt comfortable with him, and I felt like we understood each other on some level. And it just kind of came to me in this last week when I was doing some of this work on myself, how much I missed out on by being told from an early age that I shouldn't end up like him. And I've been told throughout my entire life that sometimes I have a tendency to be condescending, or that I can be an intellectual snob. And that's another thing that I've just started understanding, is that I saw a couple videos on TikTok of people talking about how they get shamed for using big words, and that is related to their autism, because there's something about the way their brain is wired that they want to be extremely precise with their language. And remember, I've been reading since I was 4. I read a ton of books. I have a huge vocabulary. And it's funny, you can see or hear on the show sometimes, I will use a word and then I will stop for a minute and try to find a different word that I think is a little bit more widely understood. Because I do sometimes use really words that people have never heard of or don't necessarily know what my friend might call SAT or GRE words. Like, that's just part of my vocabulary. And I was watching this video and somebody was talking about how that is the first word that comes to them. So then when someone says they don't understand or they're trying to make themselves more understood, more comprehensible, they have to stop and like search through their brain for either a smaller word or shorter word, a word that seems more widely understood. That has happened to me my entire life. And what I realized all of a sudden, because my uncle had like a dictionary knowledge of words and would be absolutely kind of obnoxious about you misusing a word, and to the point where it was kind of a joke in the family. But again, I realized recently, like, that was part of his neurodivergence. Just like that's part of my neurodivergence. And again, because I have done the trauma healing work that he probably never really did, I have learned to be more loving about the way that I express that. And I have understood that it comes across sometimes to people as me being condescending or an intellectual snob. There's this old story, my best friend from high school who is a wonderful person and was just really loving and kind and not afraid to point things out like that to me. There's still a joke with us because I said we were going to go on a reconnaissance mission, and she said, what does reconnaissance mean? Or I don't know what that means. And I said to her, you don't know what reconnaissance means? And I guess I said it in such a like condescending, kind of rude way. And like in my mind, I was just shocked because to me that was a really common word that, you know, anytime when it's a military phrase, it just means that you're going to go and scope things out. We're going to go on reconnaissance. And of course, I think it's a French word originally, but they use it all the time in military movies and documentaries and shows. And to me, it was like a common word that everybody would know. So I was just so surprised that she didn't know what it meant that I was like, my reaction was really like, oh, you don't know what reconnaissance means? Like I was just shocked, but it came across like, you don't know what reconnaissance means, you stupid idiot. And again, neurodivergence, neurospiciness, just me being surprised, but like not expressing it in a way that came across in a loving way or just in a, you know, just, it was a neutral reaction that came across really feeling really judgmental to her. And it kind of became like a running joke because she totally called me out on it right away. And like right away I was like, oh my God, I didn't mean it that way. I just was really surprised that you didn't know that word. That sums up many, many, many encounters I've had in many ways, not just around words. And when I was doing this healing work this last week and connecting with my uncle, I realized that some of this neurospiciness that is not acceptable in society, that comes across as, let's say, being condescending or an intellectual snob or not understanding social cues, things like that. If we could allow for that, the world would be such a more diverse place and a more loving place. And if we gave each other grace, and if we, like my friend did, she called me out on it right away, like, geez, that was rude. What do you think? I'm stupid? You know, she just right away kind of called me out on it. And I was like, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean it to come across that way. I was just genuinely surprised because, again, words are my thing. Words have always been my thing. One of my foci is words. I love words. I wrote a book. It's right behind me here. I read constantly. I just love words. And so what has been coming to me about this topic and about this transition that we are making, hopefully, out of 3D into 5D, all that really means is we are expanding our space. We are allowing for more unconditional love. And what does that mean? It means allowing for more experiences. It means, on my part, understanding in that example, I'm going to have to tell her that I talked about her in this show, so shout out to my friend Caroline. it means for me understanding that sometimes things come across harsher than I intended them to, and I have owned that. But I feel like the world at large has not reciprocated that. That if you are different in any way, not just neurospicy, neurodivergent, whatever way you are, this comes up a lot for people of color, for people who are gender fluid, for people who are gay, all of that. Any difference at all, people with different skin color, we're still doing that, is called out as being wrong in some way. And that is a very 3D mentality. This right or wrong, all or nothing, black or white, judgmental view of the world. It's funny because I've had a big response on TikTok when I talked about the 3D, 5D shift. And there were so many people out there really worried and having a lot of fear about it. And, what if this person doesn't make it? And what does this mean? And what about this? And the whole nature of this shift is that it's really an expansion. And what does an expansion do? What does unconditional love do? It allows for everything. It allows for the differences between us. It celebrates the differences between us. It allows for misunderstanding and forgiveness. It allows for someone to say, hey, that hurt my feelings. And for you to say, oh my gosh, I didn't mean it that way, but I'm sorry. Because I acknowledge that that's how it was received. That's another thing that comes up a lot just in society in general, but especially when we're doing things like trauma healing or when we're dealing with differences in the way that we process information, in the way that we feel emotions, in the way that we express emotions. Not everyone is going to receive things the same way. And if they did, it would be boring. If we were all the same, this would be such a boring world. This would be, there's lots of movies and shows, Pleasantville or The Stepford Wives. Conformity is 3D. Demanding that people fit into a certain box based on whatever the criteria is, that is the old way of thinking that we are being invited to release, that we are being invited to expand beyond. Now, just a little bit of a nuance here. And I mentioned this before when I was talking about my uncle. Being different, allowing for experiences, does not mean that we are open to abuse, that we invite abuse, that we tolerate abuse. There is a line, absolutely, of allowing. But allowing people to be themselves, to live the lives they want to live, that make them feel fulfilled, that align with whatever they feel that their purpose is, if they are living their lives in a way that is making the world a better place, or at least not hurting anyone else, let's allow for that. And part of this shift that we see a lot right now in the binary thinking of people is this assumption that somehow by living your life, you are hurting me in my life. And we will use the example of being gay, for instance. So there was still, unfortunately, all the stuff about gay marriage. Somehow if you get married, like my sister is married to a woman, somehow my sister being married to a woman, certain people think that that actually harms their heterosexual relationship. That is a incorrect programming thing that needs to be released. So there is nuance in this, and this is a complicated subject, and this is not something that's going to change overnight. But this is something, again, that changes with us individually. When we soften our judgments of ourselves, then that is reflected out in the way that we treat other people. As I have gotten kinder and less judgmental of myself, I am still working on that, absolutely. It has made me kinder and less judgmental of other people. And so that is what we are going to explore in our meditation today. And we've done this a few times. It's been a little while, I think, since we've done this. And all of these meditations are always different because they're channeled. But what I want to leave you with here is this idea that your differences, your uniqueness, is part of your own awakening. My sensory sensitivity, my hearing sensitivity is what allows me to hear and call in and channel frequencies of sound that I now use for healing. So the things about you that people told you were too much or not enough or weird or unacceptable as a child throughout your life, again, as long as they're not hurting anyone else, a lot of times those are the very things that are our gifts. That I sometimes say my sensitivity is my superpower. Now, Superman couldn't be around kryptonite because he had superpowers, but he also had that one thing, right? So my sensitivity is my superpower, but it is also my kryptonite. And that is a really difficult road to walk. That is how this being neurospicy creates difficulties, because the world isn't made for people with sensitive hearing. Absolutely. The world isn't made for people who are sensitive, but there's no reason it couldn't be. There's no reason we couldn't make allowances for that. I was joking to my husband the last time we went to I tend to go to quiet concerts and I like acoustic music more, but we went to see Jack White and it was extremely loud. He was in the White Stripes, kind of a punk band. So loud, so many flashing lights. And I said to my husband, why do people have to make noise too? Like, the concert's already noisy enough. Why does everybody have to be screaming and yelling? And that's an expression of them having fun. That's a neurotypical expression of having fun and a kind of accepted societal, like snapping, the quiet snapping, or like rubbing your hands together or waving your hands. That is a neurospicy, acceptable, allowing way to celebrate, to recognize that making noise is not celebratory for everyone. For some people, it actually hurts. When there is too much noise, it feels like someone is driving an ice pick into my brain, to the point where I will cover my ears and bend over and kind of rock back and forth in a very sort of representative visual of someone having an autistic meltdown. I just can't. So, in the spirit of awakening, our unconditional love, that's what spiritual awakening is, that's what 5D is, we start by awakening more love for ourselves. And that in turn is projected in the people around us. We start having softness within, we see softness without. We have more understanding and forgiveness for the people around us. So let's meditate together. Find a really cozy, comfortable, supported position. It doesn't matter if you're sitting up or you're lying down. Just allow yourself to be fully supported. We're really going to be calling in some loving kindness for ourselves, some compassion for ourselves in this meditation. So find a position in which you would like to receive that for yourself. It can be really difficult for us to receive kindness, especially from ourselves, because we've been programmed to be judgmental about ourselves. So if it feels most receptive to lie on your back, do that. If it feels more receptive to sit up, just find a position that feels supported. We're going to begin, as we almost always do, with 3 to 5 deep oxytocin breaths. Oxytocin is the love hormone. It increases our love for ourselves and others, and we can produce oxytocin by vibrating the nerves that vibrate the vagus nerve through this breath. So we're going to take a deep breath in through the nose. You might place your hands on your belly. We want the belly to really float out strongly. We're breathing all the way down to the bottom of our hips when we breathe in. And then as we sigh our breath out, we're going to make an audible ha sound from high to low, again vibrating the nerves that in turn vibrate the vagus nerve, telling us that we're safe, producing oxytocin, giving us more love chemically within our bodies. So I'll do one with you, and then I'll encourage you to do at least 3 to 5 more of those, letting your breath float in, letting the belly come out. Do a few more of those, and just notice, even after I've done one here with you, I can feel the settling in my body. I can feel a sense of coziness, of warmth, of that oxytocin bringing me some more love. Anytime you need these breaths, just doing 3 to 5 of these can make a huge difference in your nervous system, can help you come out of a cycle of self-judgment and into some softness. And that is what you deserve, softness toward yourself, which is then reflected as softness toward the world around you. So what we're going to do in this meditation is focus on softness in our bodies. And we're going to start with the belly. The belly is an area that we are almost always holding in some way. We're sucking our belly in, we're holding strength in our belly. We use our core muscles to support ourselves as we stand, as we sit throughout our day. Right now, I want you to let your belly go completely. Let your gut come out. Let everything just pooch out. It's okay to allow this. You might collapse down into your tailbone a little bit if you're sitting up. It's okay to do that for these 20 minutes. In the pursuit of some softness, softening the belly. And it can really help to put your hands on the belly. The belly is a place that so many of us judge ourselves. You might rub your belly gently with your hands. By placing your hands on your body with intention, you're immediately calling in that Reiki, that universal life force energy. Whether you've been attuned or not, everybody can share Reiki. So putting your hands on your belly, maybe rubbing them a little bit, just getting that energy going, allowing them to just rest on your belly. We have been trained from a very early age to have hatred for our bodies, most of us, and especially for the belly. A lot of times it's an area we never really come present in because it feels so scary to us. It feels foreign. We have placed it outside of ourselves because we are judging it rather than softening, rather than including it as part of our beautiful body we've been gifted to operate in this physical plane. So just keeping your hands on your belly here. I'm also assisting you with some Reiki through this transmission. Sending some loving energy into your belly. You can add that oxytocin breath in at any point if it feels good. Anytime you breathe out through the mouth, it helps release energy. And all of us hold energy in our belly. For some of us, it's bound up really tightly. For some of us, it's herniated out, which can actually make our belly grow larger. However, we are holding energy in our belly. We are just taking a moment to allow it to be that way. Before we can make change, we have to accept our current reality. So just notice how the energy in your belly feels. Maybe you feel nothing. That's very common, to feel really disconnected to your belly if you've never sent your awareness there before. Using the hands can help with that, but it may just feel like a big empty void, like a big dark cave. That's okay. Just allow it to be that way for a moment. It might feel stuck, like nothing's moving, like it's a little bit stagnated. You might feel that you're holding energy. It might feel really constricted and tight and bound up. One of the great things to do for your belly is to go and receive some physical release work on your belly, some massage work on your belly, on the deeper muscles in your hip, the psoas muscles. Sometimes you need to find a specialized therapist for that, but that can be a really good way to reconnect with the belly. Breath work, another really good way to reconnect with the belly. You might place one hand on the upper part of your belly, one hand on the lower part of your belly, just really focusing in. And what you might notice is that just by focusing in this area, by consciously letting go of the holding, that you've noticed a bit of shift. So let's all take a big breath together. We're going to sigh it out. You can use that audible ha sound or not. I want you to breathe deeply into the low part of your belly, all the way down. And then as you sigh it out, I just want you to soften your belly as much as you can. Really allowing the belly to be soft here. And what you may find is that that softness begins to spread. So let's do another one of those deep breaths in all the way down to the bottom of your belly. And then as you sigh that breath out, just releasing any tension, any holding, any judgment that you've been holding in your belly, just letting it go as much as you can. Being easy with yourself about this. We're so judgmental that we tend to be judgmental about our judgment. Take another big deep breath all the way down into the belly. Last time here, just really sigh that out. Let go as much as you can. Just let your belly relax completely. And if it doesn't relax, let go of the judgment about that. You can always come back and repeat this. And as you're ready, move at least one of your hands up to your chest, up to your heart space. We're going to do a few little thymus rubs or thymus taps. So right above your breastbone, you're just going to rub in one direction, whatever feels good. You can go both directions a little bit. You can also make a fist and lightly tap on your breastbone. You can use fingertips as well. To me, that feels a little bit disruptive for my system. It's a little bit too much stimulation. I like the rubbing. This is another way to stimulate the vagus nerve to produce oxytocin, the love hormone, giving us more self-love. So as that feels good, just let your hand come still. You can keep one hand on the belly, or you can relax that other hand down. If it's not comfortable to have a hand on your chest, you can rest your hands in your lap and just kind of point them up at your chest with intention. Again, I'm assisting you through this transmission with Reiki. This is a place where we also hold so much non-softness, so much tension, so much fear, a lot of armoring. Everyone has been hurt. And sometimes our response to that is to close our heart space, to actually physically roll forward, which is encouraged by the way that we live, where everything is in front of us. We're always holding things in front of us. So call a little bit of openness into your chest here, whatever that looks like for you. You may actually want to kind of move your shoulders back a little bit. That may not feel comfortable. You may just set the intention to open. And what this feels like is a little bit of a broadening along your collarbones. This can be really subtle. You may not notice any real movement in your body. And then a little bit of an opening in the shoulders. And if that's not accessible to you, again, just set the intention that you're opening your heart forward. Softening your self-judgments in the heart. Softening any fear, any hurt. We're just inviting love into the space now. Sending love into the belly, into the heart, softening this core area of our being. Do a couple of nice big sighs. Add that audible ha sound if you can. Just really releasing some stuck energy from the chest now. This in turn releases some energy from the shoulders and the neck, where we carry so much of our tension, the upper back. You might even move your neck around a little bit. We're also going to include the throat here in a moment. But just focusing on the chest for this last few breaths, softening as much as you can. Opening the chest, opening the front of the body to receive love now. Beautiful unconditional love coming through in the frequency of my voice, in the Reiki that I'm sending from your own body as you call in that unconditional love through your body, through your hands, directing it at yourself. Let's just take a moment to do a couple of affirmations here before we move on. These are most potent if you can say them out loud, but you can also just think them. You can tweak them as well. That can be really powerful. I soften my own judgments about myself and others. I call softness into my body and energetic fields. I allow myself to soften with love now. I unconditionally love myself and others. Maybe take another nice breath and sigh it out. You may find this making you emotional. That's just energy being released. Just allow for that. Breathe through it. We don't realize how much we are lacking in softness until we start to focus on this. We don't realize how much hatred we have for ourselves, how much intolerance, how much judgment. So allow yourself to release even a fraction of that now. Know that you are perfect exactly as you are made, that everything about you was made for a reason. Everything about you was made for you to shine your light, for you to claim your purpose, for you to be who you are without apology, without regret. And know that the more loving you are toward yourself, the more loving you can be toward others as well. So bringing a hand now up to your throat, just gently, if that feels good, resting it on the front of your throat. You can bring both hands there. You can again just use intention by kind of holding your hand out and directing it at the throat. This is an extremely vulnerable area, so may not feel comfortable to touch it. That's completely fine. Give yourself another nice big sigh, breathing in through the nose, sighing it out, adding that audible ha, and just setting this intention to release any holding, any tension, any judgment that's in your throat, it's in your neck. Bringing softness into this area now, bringing love in. This is our center of creative expression. You were made to be creative. But that resistance, that tension, that tightness, that hatred, that fear stifles our creativity and our expression of that. So just bring some softness here. And again, letting go of any judgment about how you're doing this, about how well it's working. Come back to this. There's no need to complete this in one revolution. You can come back to this multiple times. Just softening in the neck and the throat. You might move your head around a little bit. And then moving up to the head, it may not feel comfortable to place your hands on your head. You can do that. You can also just kind of hold your hands in a comfortable position and imagine, perhaps in front of your heart even, that you're holding your head in your hands. Perhaps imagine even that you're holding your brain in your hands. There's so much plasticity in our brains. They have potential to change, to be fluid, to flow, but our programming creates rigidity. So in your brain space now here, just sending this intention of softness, of allowing for flow, of allowing for plasticity, of allowing the softening of the judgments, of that programming that was given to you by society, by your family, by the people you looked up to. Sometimes the programming comes from the people who were the cruelest to us. Give yourself permission to release that now. And again, we'll include a few affirmations here. I release any programming in my mental space that tells me I am not enough. I release any programming in my mental space that tells me I am too much. I release any programming in my mental space that tells me I am wrong in any way. I am perfect. I am creative. I am soft. I allow myself to love myself unconditionally. I love myself without judgment. And just relaxing now, just receiving all this beautiful energy you've bathed yourself in. We're going to step into a little bit of healing sound, just to send even more love, even more softness into your body, into your mental and emotional fields, into your energy. Sayana Take one more nice deep breath, sigh it out with that audible ha sound, if you can, if it feels good. Know that any messaging you have received that you are not enough, that you are too much, that there is something wrong with you is not true. You are made exactly as you were meant to be made. You are capable of loving yourself fully, which allows us to love others more fully. It also allows us to receive love more fully. So in this last moment here, call as much softness into your system as you can. Allow yourself to receive the love that is coming from the universe, that is coming from me, that is coming from you to you. Know that this love is deserved. Know that you are worthy. Know that you are enough. Know that you are made exactly as you were meant to be made. And you deserve to give and receive love unconditionally. As you're ready, just allow any work you're doing energetically to release. Just relax your hands down if they've been up. Maybe begin to slowly move, circling wrists or ankles. Just coming back to yourself, knowing that you can repeat this as many times as you'd like, but setting the intention here to bring some of this softness into the rest of your day or evening, into the rest of your week, into the rest of your month and year, into the rest of your life. You deserve softness within and around you. Satnam. The truth of your identity is that you are a being of unconditional love at your source. Allow yourself to feel that, to receive it, to soften to that truth. Now and in all moments. Take a last deep breath or two if you'd like. Maybe do a little light shake of your body, just discharging any last bits of rigidity that want to be released, softening into the rest of your day or evening. As you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a beautiful, soft rest of your week. I will see you next week for Wind Down Wednesday. Be good to yourself. You deserve it.